McGrath comes in, it's on its way, it's there! The miracle on grass!
Owen with a kick to full forward, Cloak, not quite, Blair, Collingwood back in front.
The scene, he delays the give, Franklin, this is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman! Poor fans can't bear to watch. They led by 28 points at one stage, but the perfect storm is erupted. Oh, who else? McDonald,
Man, doesn't it feel like we just had like the first few rounds of the footy season and we're already going into round 20? Only a handful of games left until we get to finals, and it's already things are really coming down to crunch time, especially with what happened in round 19. Some heavy finals implications, some teams dropping in, some teams dropping out, and just before we get into things, I have to give a round of applause to GWS's social media account for what they posted after the round. Donnie, I'm sure you saw this. I mean, I really hope everyone saw this, because if you'll remember, that I think it was from like a few Olympic Games ago, but there is that one speed skater that finished first because everyone crashed. They had that with Essen, St. Kilda, and Richmond as some of the teams that crashed. So that was good stuff. It was a miracle to see GWS actually win an important game. Of course, we're going to get to that in due time. But I'm your host, Ross Allen, joined alongside by the AFL correspondent, Coach Donnie Hassan. Coach, how are we feeling after a solid win for your Sydney Swans and kind of a hectic round for some other final teams?
Man, just a crazy, crazy round. It almost gets to the point where I'm trying to figure out who wants that 8th spot, because right now nobody is seeming to fight for it. And the funny thing about it that you mentioned, that I did see that tweet, that is called doing a Bradbury.
Yes,
Thank you. It actually has got into Aussie slang terms. So yep, that is doing a Bradbury. So I think they're trying to insinuate that GWS is trying to do a Bradbury. They're going to let everybody else wreck as they get to the finals. That's absolutely hilarious.
Well, given that the Giants have a hard time winning, I'll take it when everyone else loses. But thank you so much for tuning in today. It's always a pleasure to come to you guys, and really do appreciate all the support, especially since we are the American voice of Australian football, and we do appreciate all of you. I mean, we're getting close to almost a quarter of our fan base, at least according to my statistics from our audio shows, are Australian. So we really do love our cousins across the pond is what I like to call all of you. But let's get into this round proper. We're going to get that starting with Port Adelaide and Collingwood. Then we're going to cruise on over, take a little preview at the current final standings, and maybe see if our predictions from last round have changed a little bit depending on what happened this round. And of course, Don's going to get you his team of the round, some interesting possibly power rankings, at least with the number 4 and 5 teams. And then of course we're going to get into a round 20 tipping. But like I said, Port Adelaide versus Collingwood, and Port continues their dominance over non-top 8 teams as they handle Collingwood after a little bit of a slow start here, though. So things were, I guess, maybe Port Adelaide, the first, I guess, little bit of that first quarter, first term. You're wondering if Port Adelaide was really going to show up in this one, but then they kind of get their behinds in gear and they finish off strong in this one. And this is a game where you had Charlie Dixon leading the way with 4 goals. And the problem now is that the Magpies have dropped 4 of their last 5. And they're actually getting close to wood and spoon contention given how Hawthorne and North Melbourne have been looking recently. And that's good news for Giants fans, because given the trade that happened this offseason, if the Pies finish last in the league, the Giants actually they have a chance to not only make the finals, but also get the first pick in the draft. So, fingers crossed. We'll have to wait and see there. The Power are on a roll. They've won 5 of their last 6. And let's talk Port Adelaide's chances of making the top 4. And let's also talk, there's a moment in the game where between Charlie Dixon and Jordan Rowehead where Dixon seemingly, well, he at least had hands on the back, and most people think he pushed. So what do you think about this situation? Was this a push in the back, and was this a missed call by the officials, or sorry, the umpires, and is this really any different than what they've been calling the whole season?
Oh, the hands in the back roll. I know I was watching an episode of On the Couch this morning, and Jared Healy absolutely just lit into the umpires over this last few weeks because they're not calling it. It's hard to argue that it isn't. There were several instances this weekend where you're pretty sure that that's probably a push in the back, probably should have been called. It's not the defending space with the forearm or using their hands to defend space and then going up. There it looks to be extension, unfortunately. But if you really look at it, I don't think this is a call that changed the game at all. I think Port Adelaide, except for a little sputter at the start of the game through most of the first quarter, they really played really, really well. They capitalized on a Collingwood team that's undermanned. It's still kind of trying to find its way under caretaker coach Harvey, where this is a Collingwood team that honestly they look rudderless, they look lost, and it doesn't help that Pendlebury goes down with an injury to his leg to the point where he may be done for the year. And when you lose experience on this young Collingwood team, it really, really hurts you, especially in the area like the midfield.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, that is not going to bode well for them. And then let's take a look at Port Adelaide's chances at making the top four. So right now, they are in fourth with 52 points. Brisbane and Sydney is right behind them with 48 each. Brisbane has 127 percentage points. Sydney with 118. Port Adelaide 121. So they're only leading to that game. Right now, if you take a look at the remaining games for this Port Adelaide club, their last 4 games are going to be against. They're going to be against the GWS Giants. They're going to be against the Adelaide Crows. And then they have Carlton and the Doggies. So right now, all games are winnable. I think they're going to be the favorite in at least 3 of these 4 games, and we'll have to see, depending on what they do in these next 3 rounds, how they're going to look against this Doggies team in terms of who might be favored to win. So, realistically, I think Port Adelaide could. It's a 3-1 is manageable, and if they see expectations, they could finish out the season 4-0. Then, if you look at Brisbane, they got Gold Coast, Hawthorne, Freo, and West Coast. So this Brisbane team could finish. I think a 4-0 finish for them is a little more realistic than Port Adelaide finishing 4-0. And then with Sydney, right now we have listed, and you got Essendon, North Melbourne, Gold Coast. So, do you think that? I mean, obviously they're at risk of falling out. It looks like, given the what we see from Brisbane and Sydney, Port Adelaide seemingly has to win out.
I don't know if they have to win out because they do have that nice little game gap between them and Brisbane and Sydney. So they do have that fallback gap, which you would say, looking at their 4 games left, the Doggies is probably that mulligan, that game that you most likely would see them not winning. GWS, Adelaide, Carlton, if you just look at it right now, you would think they should be favorites in all 3. They should win all 3. They win those 3. That Doggies game, I don't think is going to be super impactful when it comes to if they make the 4, because I think they'll already be there. It may be for, can they move up to potentially 3rd or 2nd if the Doggies or Melbourne stumble. So I think Adelaide has got a really good foot in here, but you just never know. The showdown between them and Adelaide is always tough. GWS is a team, again, we've kind of harped on it all year. They're a Jekyll and Hyde team. You never know what game you're going to get. Are you going to get a Swans game where you start off great and you fall apart, or a game like this where you fall behind early and then you come roaring back to win it late? So we'll really have to see. I would right now pencil Port in at 4, but I'm not going to pen them in because you just never know. I mean, they drop one to GWS, they get a little rattled. They go into that Adelaide game almost feeling like they have to win the next 2 to at least hold the opportunity to stay in 4th going into that Doggies game in the last game of the season.
A little bit of pressure on them, so we'll see if they could almost live up to it, overcome that, and end up with a really solid spot being at the top 4 of the ladder. The next game, I mean, speaking of the ladder, let's talk about a team that's almost out of the basement of the ladder, and that is the North Melbourne Kangaroos. They took on Carlton this round. And although it was a really solid game until halftime. Then as soon as that the siren to start the second half happened, the Roos really just took they took command of this game. They took over, and Carlton had no answers for them. Is what it seemed like. If we saw just looking at the difference between the second term and the third term, Carlton was 5-6. They end up after 2. They end up 5-10 after 3. Then the Roos 5-4 after 2. 12-6 after 3. So that third term was a huge turning point in this game, obviously. And that also helps, like, when you have the Roos, I mean, you kick 7-2 in the third. And let's talk about Nick Larkey having a career game, kicking 7-1 in this one. Fantastic stuff from him. It almost reminiscent of Josh Bruce putting on the show when he kicked 10 goals earlier this season against this team. So he really tried to pull all the tricks out of his hat. And we just got done talking about David Teague possibly saving his job over the last couple rounds. It might be a risk now after losing to the last team, to the team at the bottom of the ladder.
Well, everything that I keep hearing, this internal review could be officially set and given to the board as early as this week.
Oh boy.
And I agree that the timing of this loss is absolutely the worst possible timing. Now, do I think this loss is going to cost him his job? No. Do I think the overall outcomes of this season with a team that, again, I think a lot of people looked at as a potential finals team. I say potentials with air quotes here because I didn't mind this team, but again, I had question marks. How are some of these new players going to be able to assimilate into the group? But unfortunately, I agree with some of them. I think Teague's days are numbered. I think he maybe sees the end of this year, and I think he gets his walking papers. I hate seeing another coach being let go by Carlton after Bolton being let go not too long ago. But this is a Carlton team with its list you would think is a finals contender that should be playing for finals, that should be in finals contention. And this loss to a Roos team that, I mean, you lose this game to the Roos team from earlier this season and got absolutely trounced by the Doggies, it looks even worse. But this is a very vastly improved Roos team, considering since round 12, this is one of the best contested teams in the entire competition. I mean, there's no arguing. North Melbourne is one of the toughest teams in the competition since round 12. Noble has got his guys going. Like I said a few weeks ago, and I still agree with this, you don't want to play North Melbourne right now because they are an absolute pain in the you-know-what. They play physical. They have a ton of kids that are just getting more and more confident the way they play. They've still got one of the best rucks in the league in Goldstein, one of the best midfielders in Cunnington. They are a matchup nightmare. So beware, teams in the finals. If you get North Melbourne, they're going to make you work.
This North Melbourne team has completely transformed themselves from the beginning of the season until this point. And honestly, I'm really thankful for that because early on I was trying to compliment this Roos team, saying that maybe they're better than what people think just because of how tough and tenacious that they play. They never give up. So, I mean, kind of like attuned to the Swans. I do appreciate them for giving me a little bit of credibility and let me be a little bit right on this one. And also, they're just everyone loves an underdog, right? And so this is a fun team to root for, especially if you're not like a fan of either. It's always fun to see a team like this pull off like what they did against West Coast, now what they did against the Blues. And speaking of, I guess, underdog teams and ones that at least I like to root for, let's talk about Gold Coast and their game against Brisbane. And although I was rooting for Gold Coast in this one, maybe to make things a little bit crazy, the Brisbane Lions are able to end their 2-game losing skid. They get their first win since losing Hipwood to that torn ACL. And it really did look like, especially early on in this game, I was like, oh boy, are they going to be able to do it? Because the Suns got to a solid start in this one. But unfortunately, that ends up just kind of tapering away as the Brisbane Lions are able to take over a little bit later in this game. And they end up putting a little bit of a hurting late on the Swans as they win this one by 49. And this was a game where, it was close real late. Lions just kind of came away within the fourth, and they kicked 8 and 4 in the fourth. So if you put up points like that, that's should almost always bag you a game. And Lincoln McCarthy leading the way. He had 4 goals in this one. And so now, Gold Coast, all but have it. At least, got to give the fan counter on this one. I like how well they played. They played them really close and hard. They've been in the 30s recently, so I'm going to put this one right there at... They're going to maybe lose some supporters from last round, Donnie. I'll put it at 30. 30 Gold Coast fans after round 19. So we went over how Brisbane looks against Port Adelaide when we were looking at that game. So obviously their chances of making the top 4 are there. And so do you think that there's any possibility that they might be able to jump a Port Adelaide, or possibly from what we've seen from Melbourne recently, maybe jump a D's team?
It's just really up in the air. Like to go back to the analysis really quickly, for me, Brisbane, this was kind of a tale of two Brisbanes. You had the ugly Brisbane that's kind of been loitering around the last few weeks, and then you have the Brisbane kind of the start of the season, after they kind of went through their run, that they really started playing really good footy. It was from the second half on. Brisbane was on it. They were attacking. They were getting after it. They were forcing this team to just continue to spread. They just played so well against the Gold Coast team that you can kind of tell they were just a little outmanned in the long run. And just looking at their run home, like, I don't see a lot of terribly difficult games until, a lot like Port, the last game of the season against West Coast at the Gabba. Collingwood should be a win. With Frio's injuries that they occurred during this week, that should be a win. You face lonely Hawthorne this week. Hawthorne is difficult, so you're not going to count this as an automatic win, but you should win this game. That's 3 in a row. That guarantees you the 3. That puts all the pressure on Port, and it sends you in a game at the Gabba against West Coast with a chance. If you win and the Doggies knock off Port, you can slip in, potentially into that 4th spot. We'll really have to see. I think Brisbane's really going to have to hope Port falters before then, because if they get to that final week and they wait for that, then it's going to come down to percentage.
Yeah.
And we'll have to see how that kind of goes on with some of the games there. There's some good percentage booster chances for both teams in that 4-game stretch as well.
Honestly, I think the 4th is going to end up coming down 2 percentage points. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you see maybe even a 3-way tie between Port Adelaide, Brisbane, and Sydney for that one. So you're going to need to really put up some points on this one and win by a lot. And honestly, wouldn't that be crazy, having 3 teams tied for 4th and having all that come down to percentage points? That would make for some damn good TV in the last round of the season. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see about that one. Then maybe speak about the aforementioned West Coast when you brought them up. Let's talk about them and St. Kilda, because St. Kilda was on fire recently. It looks like maybe they're making this huge push to another finals run, but they closely lose a potentially huge game to West Coast, as they got down to about a 30-point deficit at one point, and that ended up being just catastrophic for them in this game, not able to overcome that. And their late comeback attempt fell just short in this one. They lose by 8, and there's a couple times in the 4th where they even tied the game. And so a little bit of a heartbreaking loss for Saints fans, and it doesn't help when you got guys like, Josh Kennedy makes his return, Jack Darling, and they also has a solid game. Each of them with 3. They combined for a 6 in this one, and so it's nice to see that the important weapons that everyone knows about that West Coast has, they're kicking things in gear. So this is going to help them keep their spot in the finals, something that, a couple rounds before this, it looks like there's a lot of concern that they might drop out. So they're almost catching themselves at this point. They're not I don't think they're really in position to make a run up the ladder. They're more or less just trying to avoid falling further down the ladder than they really need to. Now, West Coast, they have back-to-back wins after dropping to Sydney, Big, and North Melbourne. And right now, as the finals sit, West Coast is 6 points ahead of the 8th spot in their 7th spot. And the Saints are just 2 points out because of that funky draw that the Giants had against North Melbourne. So, how are the Saints looking right now? Is their outlook positive or negative in terms of finals hopes? And do you think West Coast is just going to be able to hold on to that final spot?
The Saints kind of have a double-edged sword against them because not only do they have that 2 point gap behind it, but the problem is they're tied with Freo, Richmond, and Essendon, and they're the fourth of those when it comes to percentage. So St. Kilda really needs a little bit of help. They have to win a few games, and they have to hope those three other teams both fall on some hard times over these next few rounds. And looking at some of the roads to home, that's a tall tale to ask for. Unfortunately, I think St. Kilda's numerous big losses early in the season are coming back to bite them at this pointy end of the season. When if they had at least 10 to 12 more points of percentage, they'd be in 10th. That's how great. That's how much this has hurt them. That they are 4 point percentage points back behind Freo and 12 percentage points behind Richmond. That is a big margin that is not going to be easy to overcome. So right now, if I'm St. Kilda, it's you literally have to win out these final 4 games. None of them are going to be easy. And then you need a little bit of help. You're going to need Essendon, Richmond, and Freo to drop at least 1 game just to give you that chance. And it's a tall tale to ask, unfortunately.
Really gonna come down to, man, it's a bit of a bummer because it looks like Sydney really has some solid hopes, or sorry, excuse me, St. Kilda really has some solid hopes, but we'll see how things play out. Obviously, it's a lot of people fighting for the 8th spot, so it's going to come down to the wire. There's still plenty of hope for them. They're just, like you said, Donnie, they're going to have a little bit of luck on their side. But the next game here, a big round 11 rematch between the Melbourne D's and the Western Bulldogs. And we had the Bulldogs prevailing in this one. They get a little bit of revenge as Melbourne was able to top them earlier this season. And they controlled this game almost the whole way through, which was almost surprising to me. I thought it was going to be a little bit closer. Obviously, got pretty close there in the 4th. I mean, the Bulldogs pulled about within like 4 of this one. So the D's pulled them without about 4. And then the Doggies, they just kick 3 goals and essentially iced the game. And so this was a fantastic game of footy, but this is going to prove pivotal for maybe the 1 and 2 spots or the top 4 in general. And with this one, of course, he had probably another 3 points for Bontempelli. He shines. He kicks 2 with 31 disposals. And if you look at this, the D's who've been priding themselves on their defense all season long, D's and defense, it goes very well together, and it really writes every single pun you could think about this team. But they give up their 2nd most points all season. And this is dating back to the most points that they've given up was 96 to Adelaide back in round 10. So, we kind of talked about it last week, and you made some very good points of why we shouldn't be too concerned about this D's team. But now they've dropped games to non-finals teams, and they've won every game, every real big game against the finals teams. But now they finally drop a game to someone that is in the top 8, let alone the top 4. So, do we need to take a look at that, or do you still have enough confidence in this team?
Oh man, this is to take a ton from this game or to not, because you get a combination of the weather. The weather was absolutely insane in this one with periods of downpour.
That was such a fun thing to watch, though. To be honest,
I think the doggies really adjusted to what they saw the first time. So. I've always heard this, and I agree with this. It's never easy to beat a team twice in a season. It never is, because they learn. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Melbourne should be worried, because not a lot of teams can do what the Western Bulldogs did. It's just fact. Melbourne is a tough game. I think their forwards had a big issue on the same day, and it cost them. Brown has a bad accuracy game. Fritsch wasn't himself. McDonald wasn't himself. Jackson was relatively quiet. So when you have kind of like a perfect storm situation, that really
Storm.
kind of
Great pun,
helped.
Donnie.
I wasn't even trying to be completely honest with you there. But it was really was the perfect situation for the doggies. They get a Melbourne team that's not on their game is perfect. They play a really, really good game. Bontempelli again proves why a lot of people are saying he is potentially the Brownlow medalist this particular season. Another absolutely insane performance against this Melbourne Demons team, and in now we see how does Melbourne respond. This is the first time they've lost to a team in the finals. So we'll have to see how do they respond over these next few weeks, because if they climb back into their shell a little bit, this D's team could be hurting a little bit, because they could go from top of the table to potentially back in the mire. And if they get back in the mire, if they still have some of their goal scorings, it could be a shortly lived final series for Melbourne if they don't figure out their goal, if they can't right their goal kicking immediately.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some stuff happen a couple rounds ago where it looked like they might have a spark when it comes to their offense. I mean, the old adage, at least in gridiron, is that defense wins championships. And obviously, there's a lot of weight you could put in that in footy as well. But when you go against these better teams, these better goal kicking teams that you're going to see in the finals and late in the later rounds of it, you're going to also need to put up enough points on offense. You're probably going to want to be around that 80-90 mark, and you want to be able to get there almost without thinking about it, unless you're able to have that much confidence in your defense, but a defense that's been faltering recently. So when you pride yourself on defense, or you don't have a great offense to back it up all consistently enough, once that defense falls, you might be in a little bit of trouble. Obviously, these last 4 games are going to prove huge. They're finals teams. They're just about locks for top 4, but it's all about trying to build a little bit of momentum and fix themselves going into finals. And then speaking about the Adelaide team that they gave up a lot of points to in round 10, let's talk Adelaide against Hawthorne. And this was a game where both teams have been shaky recently, where, I mean, Hawthorne was on a streak and then they kind of dropped a little bit. Adelaide has just been weird this whole time, especially without Taylor Walker. But what would you know, Donnie? In Big Tex, he makes his return to the team, and the Crows put up their second most points all season, most since round 1. And this is just a game itself. Really fun, solid, close game throughout. A lot of excitement here. And I wasn't even, didn't have too much into this game. Obviously, not a lot of finals implications, but just from a game of footy, man, I was on the edge of my seat for this one. And, offense picks right back when you got Big Tex in the lineup. He kicks 4 for the Crows. And now you got a little bit with North Melbourne picking things up. The Hawthorne Hawks might have to be a little bit worried about they have to almost work to avoid finishing last and grabbing that wooden spoon, because they're now tied with North at 18 points. They are up 8 percentage points, but obviously that margin could be really close depending on what happens. So Hawthorne, you got some work to do, and you got your work cut out to you with how well North Melbourne's been playing recently. And, I mean, for the Crows, this season, not really a finals team. You have hopes mathematically. Realistically, not really. But this just was another game where you might be able to just work on some things and build a little bit of confidence going into the future. And at least you know that Taylor Walker is really damn good at scoring goals.
This is another game where I look at it and I go, has the secession plan from Clarko to his heir apparent, Mitchell, is it affecting this playing group? And I'm starting to see signs where I'm thinking it is. And this was not a typical Hawthorne performance. Again, Adelaide, I agree with you. Tex Walker makes a massive improvement. This really does change this Adelaide team big time. But I'm starting to think, are there cracks to the point where if Clarko does stay, is next year already in peril because of the fact that the playing group is, there's just something not right. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if it's personnel. I don't know if now we're starting to get mixed messages that Mitchell's doing some one thing and Clarko's doing another, and it's confusing players. I don't know. It's it's going to be a very, very interesting 18 months if this continues the way it's going, because who knows how this could play out. Will Clarko see through the rest of this contract? Will Clarko leave for one of the new high profile Collingwood, Carlton potential jobs? What is Sam Mitchell? If Sam Mitchell does get the job next year, what changes does he do? So there's just a ton of questions. Like, I hate to talk about something that's not on the field, like in the coach's box, but I really just kind of feel like this Hawthorne team is starting to kind of check out now. The season's over. They're not going to make finals. And I think the Clarko distraction is not helping matters. So we'll really have to see. If I'm Hawthorne, I'm a little worried right now. Your wooden spoon chances have drastically increased with the improved play of North Melbourne.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, man, you gotta be worried when you try to play this North Melbourne team, and there's a little bit of hope for that, and then where they could avoid finishing last. And hell, they might even finish ahead of two teams, depending on how some things could finish. So, like, going back to kind of what I said from their game, is it really is night and day difference between how they looked at the beginning of the season to how they look now, and the future outlook for this club going into 2022. And now here we go, Donnie. Yeah, it's been a really great time talking about your Sydney Swans over the last handful of rounds, because they've been looking great. And this was another game where they just look great as they pick up another solid win. They beat a finals hopeful team in the Fremantle Dockers. They win this one by 40, and it was another one where you saw almost like a classic Sydney Swans team, where a little bit worrying play early on, but then they're able to pick it up, and they completely have this game taken over by halftime. They kept 5-3 in the third while holding Freo to 1 behind. So when you kick 33 points and you limit the other team to 1, that's going to sway things in your direction, and that's always going to look great. And let's take a look at Isaac Heaney leading the way this way. He kicks 5 and 1, 22 disposals. He looked so damn impressive this round. And it's not like he was the only one that looked great, because Buddy Franklin, he kicks another handful in this one, of course. And if you look at that, 27 more to go for 1,000. It's not looking too great in terms of maybe getting 1,000, but obviously probably not going to get 1,000 by the end of the playoffs. Imagine he kicks 7 goals around until finals. Wouldn't that be great? But hell, Sydney Swans, they look primed to make a deep finals run at this point in time, and given the finals, we might be able to see Buddy get this mark, and so that would be just absolutely fantastic. And then if you take a look at the Fremantle Dockers, just 2 pivotal stats in this one that kind of show why they absorbed such a loss in this one, is that this was another game where they kicked more behinds than goals, and this is their 13th game this season where they do so. And in the fourth term, they pulled this tackle stat on the broadcast of the game. Inter 50 tackles. It was the Swans with 25 to Fremantle's 1. Not great, Donnie. Not great. But for the finals, Sydney is only 4 points out of that top 4. We've already went over that with take a look at Brisbane and Port Adelaide. Sydney obviously has a great chance. Well, maybe not great. They have a solid chance at being able to scoot their way into the top 4. At the worst, I think they finished 5th. Is how it's still looking here. And now Freo falls to 2 points out of the 8th. We talked about them as they're in that bit of a logjam where a bunch of teams tied, 9, 10, 11, maybe 12, and a lot of percentage points there. So they still have a chance to make the finals. But take it away. Please tell me how you feel about the Swans team at this point.
This was another one that kind of like we discussed previous rounds. It was kind of a slow start, and Hawthorne, Freo really kind of kicked it in. They really kind of pressured Sydney to make a few mistakes that sometimes they haven't always been making earlier this year, and you could definitely tell it kind of got to him. And going off of it, I think the turning point was Isaac Heaney's attempt for another mark of the year when that he took over Ryan. Because if you look at this at the game the way it was at the time, Sydney was down. I think it was like 12 or 14 at that point. Heaney takes that mark, kicks the goal. It drops it back. It dropped it back within 2 goals. And if you notice, that's like 10 minutes before halftime. By the time they get it to halftime, it's a 3-point game. And the second half, they go on another 8-0 goal run where they kind of blow it out. They blow the game out of proportion to the point they hit the third quarter break. It's a 30-point lead, and really Frio never gets back into it. And then to compound all of that issue is Frio loses Michael Walters to a hamstring injury and loses Nat 5 to another shoulder dislocation.
And he has surgery. He's done.
And he is done for the season, unfortunately. And again, Frio's issue of injuries just continued to rear its ugly head at the worst possible time. Darcy is fighting through his knee injury that I think he's got. I think at the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he has surgery, but they're trying to soldier him through because they know if they lose him, they are even more in trouble because they really don't have the deepest of ruck stocks behind the big Sean Darcy. So I felt so bad for all my Frio friends, and I told them in a tweet before that, I said, no matter what, we're still friends. I said, I'm not a trash talker, never have been. And I got a really nice message from one of my friends, Gil Griffin, who's my Frio representative for the U.S. fan once, and he even said, he goes, "You were just better than us today." He goes, all due respect to you guys, a heck of a game. And I sent back, I said, I completely agree. I said, if your team wasn't shark bitten, I think you guys would be in the finals. You have such a good list. Yeah. I can't wait to watch our two teams progress. I think in the next few years, these two teams potentially could be fighting in the finals, or who knows, even a grand final. Maybe we will have to see with their young lists. I'm crossing my fingers that Frio can keep Adam Chera, but unfortunately, many of the communications that I keep hearing, unfortunately, I think he's closer to headed back to his beloved Victoria than staying out in Western Australia. But you never know. But a great performance by Sydney. I think they've played really, really well. Buddy originally gets handed down a 1-game fine. He appealed the ruling, and due to some precedent set early in the season, he was let off with only a fine. He's still going to play. I know everybody's going to be like, well, coach, what do you think? Well, if the Shuey incident that happened with Callum Mills early in the season, the Danaher incident on Dane Rampy, and 2 or 3 others didn't happen, Buddy stays suspended for a week. He's got no arguments. But the fact that Shuey only got a fine, Danaher only got a fine, and there was one other one, I think it was Astbury on somebody from, I think, Geelong or the Doggies, one of those two. If those 3 don't happen, and they all get suspended instead of fines, Buddy has no argument at the tribunal, and he gets a week. I'll look at everybody. I'll look dead straight in the camera and say, Buddy deserved a week. He got off on a technicality because of what happened earlier in the year. Honest to God truth there. I was telling everybody that I was talking to, Buddy's gone at least a week. I can almost guarantee it just by the way it looked. He got off on a technicality. This is the MRO not doing something in the first place, and that's what they said. Buddy is getting off scot-free. It's a slap on the wrist for his finances. That's just the honest to God truth. Yes, this is a Swans player playing it. I'm happy he's playing, but I'm sad for the game because I think this is a bad look for the AFL and the MRO.
Certainly an interesting call there, but at the least, you can say that it's a bad decision to not give him that 1-week suspension. But it's hard to say that it's not consistent in what they've been doing all year, right? I saw everyone on Twitter, of course, was rightfully disappointed or mad at this decision. Some people calling it inconsistent on the AFL. Technically, that's wrong. Technically, this is what they've been doing all year long. So it's a bad call. At least, if you want to look at the silver line, the AFL is sticking with the ruling of how they've been through most of the season. But it's also hard to compliment that when it's been sticking with bad ruling most of the season.
I mean, I respect that they're consistent, but the
Yeah.
thing though is that honestly, they were wrong on each and every single one of those. I believed every single one. I don't care if it's a forearm or an elbow. It's still an intentional hit to the head that should be a game suspension. Just again, I I completely agree with the 1 game suspension in the first place. I had no problem with that. I know we're playing an Essendon. I know Sydney's playing an Essendon team this week. That Buddy might be a thing that tips us over the edge, but I was all prepared, ready, and willing to go. Okay, Buddy's gone. Who's coming in now? So, but well, like I said, we'll have to see. Again, it's a little bit of a spark. What really irritates me is everybody's like, "Oh, that's Buddy. He always gets the calls." I don't know about that. I'm not going to go that far.
Yeah.
Let's not go that far. I don't think it's that cut and dry, if I'm being completely honest with you. So
Exactly. And that's going to take us into the second to last game of the season. This is the Geelong Cats taking on a bit of a Richmond team that seems like they're playing without their heart and soul without Dusty. At least he was able to make it out of the hospital. He's good. He's home. And so he's recovering. So that's great news. And it looks like he should be on track to be back next season, which, of course, is only good for the game. Whether you hate the Richmond Tigers or love them, the game is better when Dusty is on that pitch. But in this one, we have the Cats where there is a blip of life for the Richmond Tigers in the first term where they took the lead, but then that did not last long. This wasn't a flashy game necessarily by the Geelong Cats, but this is one where they gritted out a bit of a game and they ended up winning by a good margin of 38. And they keep their spot just near the top of the ladder. They're the 2 team right now, so they continue their nice stretch of games right now, where they've just been winning, and they haven't been winning great, but they've been winning, and they've been looking pretty solid in doing so. And this one, Tom Hawkins, he had 4 goals in this, and it seemed almost like Richmond was in a, would you be able to call it maybe a bit of a hangover from their game from last round. It looked like, man, they put in a lot of energy for that big win and the 300th game for Jack. But that might have taken it out of them, and that might have really been their last, I guess, big push of the season and at the finals. Because they just looked like it was a night and day difference between the team we saw last round and the team we saw this one. And so right now, Geelong has a really good shot at actually finishing at top of the ladder. If you want to take a look at the last number of games for them, with them in Brisbane, because right now they got games against North Melbourne, which of course is not a guaranteed win anymore, but it's a game where they should win. A GWS game where it's not a guaranteed win, but it's another game where they should win. You can say that for St. Kilda, and then you have a tough matchup at the last round of the season with the Melbourne Demons, and so that might just really make or break that team, whether they're going to be in 1 or just another spot in the 4. And they feel like their competition right now, the current number 1 team, the Doggies, is that the Bulldogs have Adelaide, Essendon, Hawthorne, and Port Adelaide. So it looks like the Doggies should be in the driver's seat for 1. They control their own destiny, obviously, but if they have a bit of a slip up, I think the Cats have a good spot actually finishing number 1.
Cats definitely have a very good shot at doing that. Again, the biggest thing for them is just continue to win. But I actually heard this really interesting statistic while I was watching a show called First Crack on Fox Footy. In the last 10 years, only 1 team that has finished minor premiers or regular or the home and away champions, 1 has won the flag. 1 in the last 10 years. 8 of the last 10 has been second or third.
And maybe Geelong, never mind, don't win. Don't win.
Exactly. Yep. It was a very interesting stat that Lee Montagna brought up, and it did, and they actually discussed it a little bit. They go, do you almost feel like being second and third, and they kind of debated about why that is, and I agreed with what they said is that first game is a lot more competitive because you're facing your next closest opponent, where one plays 4, who's the last person to get into the double chance situation, which should mean one should win because of positioning in the ladder and so on and so forth. But sometimes that actually can be a curse. So we will definitely have to see. But I thought that was a very, very relevant stat there, especially where they're sitting at second right now. Is they're sitting in the pardon the pun here, the catbird seat.
That's kind of funny, man. That's really interesting here. And I mean, with the Richmond Tigers, what you put into maybe saying that maybe their game last round is kind of their last full effort of a game, and how are their finals chances looking? How's their outlook in your opinion?
Well, the one thing Richmond's got to hang their hat on a little bit is if you look at it, I know they don't have Dusty, but they go into these last 4 games, and really the GWS game in round 22 is really the only one you can sit here and go, you kind of have to be worried. Freo, I think the loss of Fife and Walters really, really hits them hard. I think Richmond, yes, they don't always travel very well to Western Australia, but I think Richmond would get a tick from most people in that game. Yes, you're playing a North team that's tough and physical, but Richmond, again, their style sometimes can suffocate teams. You'd think they'd come out. You'd think they would be favorites in that. GWS, I think, is a coin toss. I think it's what GWS team shows up. Is it the GWS team that plays really, really well, or is it the GWS team that has lapses? We'll have to see. And last game of the season is against Hawthorne, which could be absolutely massive. Hawthorne could go into that game knowing they win and they're in. We'll have to see. Again, it's a 4-game stretch that you would sit here and go, 3 games your favor, 1's a coin toss that gives you a good shot of making the finals, but you almost have to win. You have to win 3 of these 4. And Freo really is the only one you could be tiny bit terrified because it is over an Optus Stadium. But other than that, North Melbourne, Hawthorne, you should win those. Again, as we've discussed, they've been a little bit more difficult. So this is not an easy last 4 games for Richmond, but you would think they're favorites in at least 3 of those 4, if not all 4, even depending on what GWS's form is going into that round 22 matchup.
And I guess what better way to maybe take a look at their form than talk GWS and Essendon, as I mean, the Dons were able to break into the top 8 last round, and then they fall right back out as they lose to the GWS Giants. They kind of waste a huge opportunity, which is almost shocking to me because normally it's the Giants that are the ones blowing away huge opportunities. So it was a pleasant surprise for me. I wasn't complaining when I was watching this game. That's for damn sure. I was more just, I guess, taken aback. I was like, I mean, although, to be fair, it wasn't that great of a game of footy. It was, I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the prettiest of performances to watch. But at the least, one team finishes with more points than the other. The Giants get the win, baby. That's all that matters. And so I'm really okay with this one, especially with my little mini rant that I had to have last episode. This was a little bit of a breath of fresh air, I guess it's safe to say. But the Giants, they get back into the 8, and the Essendon, they blow about a 20-point lead that they had around halftime. And now, if you take a look at the finals, realistically, each team likely has to win 3 of their last 4 if they want to have a really good shot at making the 8. One might get lucky. You might be able to go 2-2. But that's the worst that you could really go, and if you want to make it into the finals. GWS is only 2 points ahead of Essendon, and we already went over that log jam we have. Everyone right outside of the top 8, a lot of percentage points really making the difference. So neither team is in it, neither team is out of it, and there's so much that could happen over these next 4 rounds. Honestly, you could have one team dropping down to like 13th, 14th, depending on what happens. It's that close. So they're really going to have to buckle themselves up because this game, in the grand scheme of things, it means nothing. Like, I really hope, I mean, obviously Essendon is going to pat themselves on the back for this one. Their coach came out and said that they're not going to go far in the finals with performances like this, which is nothing but true. And GWS not going to be able to make the top 8 maybe with performances like this in the last 4 games against some tough teams. So This is a game where if you're the Giants, you take a breath, you say, good job, we got these 4 points, but you got to put this one behind you as soon as possible and just try to get as better as possible. And hopefully next round, correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, Toby Green's back, right?
Yep, Toby Green is back
That's
from
huge.
hotel quarantine.
That's huge.
Now to go off this game really was a tale of two halves. If you look at the first half, Essendon dominated the first half. This looked like a fifth quarter from the Swans GWS game, because it was the same thing the Swans did, was dominating. They were scoring points, but it was like the air was let out of the proverbial balloon at halftime because GWS just took it. I mean, it was like the team swapped jumpers, because GWS was doing everything that Essendon was doing, and Essendon was doing everything that GWS was doing.
Like 3 straight goals in the third.
Exactly, and that it really tanked the way Essendon plays. And I agree with Essendon's coach. You're not going to go very far if you have these type of performances in finals. And it's not like Essendon is a lackluster team. They've got some players. They just did not have a very good game in this one, and they got burned by it, and it does keep Essendon back, and it does keep Essendon back in the mire when it comes to the finals. It doesn't rule Essendon out, but it definitely makes things more interesting, because that was your game against a direct opponent in the chase for the finals, and now you're behind them. So now you go in, yes, you got superior percentage over Richmond, Freo, and St Kilda. That's great, but you got to win games. And as we kind of stated, Essendon's run home is not simple. So they get Sydney this week. That really doesn't help them out very much. And then their last 2 games of the season aren't any more cakewalks. You get the last 3 games include the Western Bulldogs the week after Sydney, and then Gold Coast and Collingwood, which is nice, but you gotta hope that you don't fall far enough back that these final 2 games are basically meaningless. So this game against Sydney this week is absolutely crucial. Essendon has to try to get 4 points out of this, because if they don't, it really makes that game against the Duggies that much more important, because they can't go into those final 2 games coming off 3 consecutive losses.
Call it a hot take, Donnie, but I'm just go on maybe a little bit of a limb and say that if they're going to get because you have to look right now, you could really make the case that they can go 2-2. You could comfortably say that they can go 2-2 to end the season. I think if, like I was saying, you probably have to get 3 or 4 at least. I think their better chances actually against the Western Bulldogs than it is the Sydney Swans, given what we've seen recently.
That's a big call there. Yeah. I would somewhat agree with that, with Alex Keith going down in that Bulldogs game, but they did have Josh Shackey step up and play really well. It all kind of depends on what type of Sydney they get, because you're going to get, it sounds like Callum Mills and Colin O'Riordan are both going to be out of hotel quarantine, or Harry Cunningham, my apologies.
Huge for Sydney as well. I mean, both Sydney teams are finally recovering from that whole debacle that we had around the country.
And their performance staff. So some people would say, well, for Sydney to win 2 games after all that debacle of losing players and performance staff and stuff like that, it's pretty impressive couple of wins. And now you face an Essendon team they're reeling, and sometimes those are the teams that are the most dangerous when you step up against them. For absolutely, for sure. But I don't know, this Essendon team you can tell their youth is bothering them a tiny bit right now, because they're getting to that pointy end of the season, and this is when you need to be at your peak. And I don't know if they're getting weary because of their fast pace that they play or what, but I'm worried that they're just going to run out of steam just a few hurdles short of the finals this year.
Oh man, really coming down to it, but that is essentially going to cap off another really interesting round of footy. I mean, we had some great action around the board. We had some kind of questionable games if we want to look at the actual play quality that we saw, but nonetheless, a lot of these games either were exciting or carried huge finals implications. So every game is a must-see TV at this point in time. But we're going to roll on into maybe a little bit of an update look at the finals, our thoughts on them, Donnie's team of the round, our power rankings, and then finish it off with some tipping. But honestly, so if you listen in the last round, Donnie and I going to the last 5, we tipped essentially using the ladder predictor on the AFL website. to come up with what our top 8 looks like. And I've actually had some changes to the bottom 2 teams in this one, actually. So, I had a bit of a hot take with the Dons and St. Kilda making in, but given their disappointing performances, you could say, in round 19, that's actually shaking some things up a bit. If you look at the changes, I actually have the 7 and 8 is the Eagles and the Giants. Is that things change a little bit for you too?
I really haven't played around with it, unfortunately, because I'll
Donnie
out
has a
myself.
busy weekend, okay? I
I'll
mean,
I'll out
anniversary,
myself.
right?
I had my
Oh
5th-year
man!
wedding anniversary this last
Oh,
Saturday with my beloved wife. In fact,
yes.
we're recording this on Tuesday because Monday we had a nice little fun day together.
Look at
We
you.
kind of spent some time kind of celebrating our anniversary. But I this is very, very interesting because, like I said, it all kind of depends on that run home. I'm leaning a lot towards maybe potentially seeing Richmond being the team that gets in at 8 instead of GWS, but we'll really have to see. I think the GWS
Well, that
Richmond
GWS Richmond
matchup
game is that's
round
probably what determined
22,
the 8 spot, huh?
that really could. I really believe so. If Essendon can't get out of their funk and win at least 2, if not 3 games these last 4, I think Richmond GWS, I think that game in round 22 could be basically a play-in game for the finals.
Kind of crazy. Oh man, I'm really nervous about that game. Really excited about that game. Of course, I'm never going to celebrate an injury, even some the opposing team. But it is okay to say, I think it's fair to say that no Dusty Martin is going to bode really well for the Giants. With them maybe getting their full team back, they've kind of got to full strength over the last couple rounds. Toby Green going to be back, and so we could finally see maybe this complete Giants roster play together. And they have a few rounds where they might be able to do so. So this takes in 22. So they have two games where hopefully they'll stay healthy and not quarantined, that we could really start to see the mesh. And that is going to be huge for this game. And right now, I mean, obviously things change almost daily, but right now the game is slated to be at Giant Stadium. So, odds might be swinging in GWS's favor. That's going to be a huge one to look out for. But Donnie, let's cut it and let's head on into your team of the round. You had plenty of spots open in this one. I think this was maybe a little bit more of an open team of the round than we've had recently. So let's know what you got.
This was a very, very interesting round because you had some big performances, especially in the forward, some absolutely massive performances here. So let's jump right into it. Team of the round, round 19. Let's start at our defenders. Mr. Reliable, Western Bulldogs, Caleb Daniels, 34 disposals, a goal, 9 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 6 score involvements, 6 marks, 5 clearances, 4 tackles, and 415 meters gained. We jump from there to Port Adelaide's Dan Houston, 21 disposals, a goal, a behind, 3 intercept possessions, 3 goal assists, 7 score involvements, 5 marks, and 613 meters gained. We jump to it. Collingwood may not have had a great game as a team, but this young man had a really good game. Collingwood's Jack Crisp, 30 disposals, 10 intercept possessions, 4 score involvements, 13 marks, 2 clearances, 6 tackles, and 353 meters gained. St. Kilda's Jack Sinclair, 22 disposals, a goal, 3 intercept possessions, 5 score involvements, 4 marks, 3 tackles, and 309 meters gained. I got to give this guy a little bit of love because he had an insane game in a loss. Melbourne's Jake Lever, 20 disposals, 15 intercept possessions, 5 marks, 2 tackles, and 363 meters gained. And one of the anchors in the back for this really good Geelong team is Tom Stewart. 25 disposals, 10 intercept possessions, 7 score involvements, 9 marks, and 421 meters gained. We jump to the ruck, and surprise, surprise, Mr. Brody Grundy from Collingwood. 27 disposals, 8 score involvements, 3 marks, 7 clearances, 2 tackles, 23 hitouts, and 248 meters gained.
Not
We
even a
jump
broken
to
record either, Donnie. So
Unfortunately, we jump to the.
just the best rock in the game. What you gonna do, right?
It's really hard considering he is just another midfielder after he taps the ball down. That's with his athleticism. We jump to the midfielders and some really big performances here. We start off with North's Taryn Thomas, 23 disposals, 4 goals, a behind, 3 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 9 score involvements, 4 marks, 5 clearances, 5 tackles, and 509 meters gained. Another Mr. Reliable in Coach Hess's team of the week is the Western Bulldogs, Marcus Bontempelli. 31 disposals, 2 goals, 4 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 8 score involvements, 3 marks, 10 clearances, 6 tackles, and 755 meters gained. Adelaide's Rory Laird, 36 disposals, 2 goals, 6 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 10 score involvements, 6 marks, 10 clearances, 5 tackles, and 518 meters gained. Sydney's Luke Parker, 30 disposals, 2 goals, 5 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 6 score involvements, 5 marks, 3 clearances, 3 tackles, and 390 meters gained. I got to give this guy some love. He played really, really well in this game. Frio's Adam Chera, 30 disposals, 2 goals, 4 intercept possessions, a goal assist, 8 score involvements, 9 marks, 4 clearances, 3 tackles, and 586 meters gained. We jump to the forwards. A lot of goals being kicked by our forwards this week. We start off Geelong's Tom Hawkins, 13 disposals, 4 goals, 2 behinds, 6 score involvements, 6 marks, 3 tackles, and 327 meters gained. The big man from Port Adelaide, Charlie Dixon, 11 disposals, 4 goals, 3 behinds, 7 score involvements, 4 marks, and 2 tackles. The goal kicker of the round, it's hard not to say this, North's Nick Larkey, 20 disposals, 7 goals, a behind, 3 intercept possessions, 13 score involvements, 8 marks, and 303 meters gained. Excuse me. St. Kilda's Max King, 13 disposals, 6 goals, a behind, a goal assist, 8 score involvements, 9 marks, and 333 meters gained. Brisbane's Lincoln McCarthy, 14 disposals, 4 goals, 2 behinds, 3 intercept possessions, 2 goal assists, 8 score involvements, 3 marks, 2 tackles, and 250 meters gained. And last but not least, rounding out the forwards is Sydney's Isaac Heaney, 22 disposals, 5 goals, a behind, 2 intercept possessions, 8 score involvements, 11 marks, 2 tackles, 403 meters gained, and one of the marks of the round with his sit and screamer on Luke Ryan. What an incredible, and I think really was the changing point for the Sydney Swans. To the bench, I'm going to give him a little bit of love. No, this is not rose-colored glasses. The Rucks representative on the bench is Sydney's Tom Hickey. 18 disposals, a goal, a behind, 3 score involvements, 4 marks, 5 clearances, 3 tackles, 21 hitouts, and 353 meters gained. Our defender is Adelaide's Tom Duday. 22 disposals, 11 intercept possessions, 3 score involvements, 6 marks, and 269 meters gained. Our midfield bench player would be West Coast Dom Sheed. 32 disposals, 2 goals, 6 intercept possessions, 10 score involvements, 6 marks, 7 clearances, and 446 meters gained. We'll give him some love. Mr. from Adelaide, Taylor Walker is our forward with 9 disposals, 4 goals, 5 score involvements, 6 marks, and 369 meters gained. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my team of the week.
Another good one, Donnie. I mean, once again, you really just never miss on that one. So, let's get into a little bit more of the possibly exciting stuff, maybe controversial, if you really want to say. I don't know. But for the first time in like 10 rounds, maybe, Donnie, we don't have the same 5 teams in the power rankings. So, I think that's something to applaud ourselves on, because obviously that does not happen all too often. Anyone that's seen them knows. And especially if you ever want to get a little bit of a sneak peek onto each one of our weekly shows, you can dropping every Tuesday night stateside, afternoon-ish Australian time. I still need to get Aussie time down, honestly. It's really weird, like the half-hour time zone difference in Australia. I mean,
for Adelaide. That's
Yeah,
just Adelaide. Adelaide's the only one that
yeah,
does have that funky little half an hour little change. But
that
the
throws me
easiest way I
off.
s- the easiest way I say it for me is at least for me in the Central is they're 15 hours ahead. So I just
Yep.
you add half a day. You had half a day to where we're at, and then either add 2 hours or three depending on where you're at. So
Especially like
it,
if it's like morning here, it's nighttime over there. If it's afternoon here, it's probably like early morning there. It's just like a little bit different, but a day ahead. It's really interesting. It's really just throwing me off. But you can check out social medias. Of course, that's my winded way of getting to that. Check out our social medias. Twitter at Fourth Long Radio, Instagram at Fourth Long Radio. Of course, you can find all of our socials if you go to thefourthandlong.com, or for all your AFL content, thefourthandlong.com/AFL. See, super easy, super convenient right there. But we do put out our power rankings the day before, so you can get a little sneak preview of that, know what we're going to be talking about. But going into this one, what we have here is that the top team stays the same. I mean, the Geelong Cats have been at the top for the last bit in a number of rounds now, and deservedly so. They're knocking on the door of a top spot, like Badani just went over, that they shouldn't want that. Maybe just stick with two. Two is good if you want to make a finals run. And so let's do that one. And what we have here is honestly our top three stayed the same from the last two rounds. Is that for me, Geelong, Sydney, the Doggies. Donnie, Geelong, Doggies, Sydney. But the mix-up, and we even had Port Adelaide the same number 4. They were number 5 for both of us. They both move up. But it's all about that fifth team. So for you, a little bit of a new one here. What do you have?
I have the Brisbane Lions. I think their win, they kind of got themselves kind of stabilized. But the funny thing about looking at the form of all the teams there after Sydney is the form gets really really funky. Like just going through it. Let's just run through the potentials here. Is that after we go through Geelong, Western Bulldogs, Melbourne, and Sydney. I won't go in order. Okay. After you look at Port, okay. After that, you've got Brisbane Lions, West Coast, GWS are the 8. Well, look at the Brisbane Lions. They've won 3 of their last 5. Okay, with 2 losses in a row before this last round's win. You jump down to West Coast at 7. They've lost 3 of their last 5, but they've won their last 2 in a
Mm-hmm.
row. And then the GWS Giants have lost 3 of their last 5 with only 2 wins in their last 4 games. So there wasn't a lot of strength down towards fifth. So it was really kind of interesting because I looked at it was Sydney and Geelong are both 4-0 in their last 4 and 4-5
Mm-hmm.
and 4 out of 5 in their last 5. So, but for me, I can't. The big win of the Western Bulldogs over Melbourne, I couldn't really jump Sydney. Now, if Melbourne would have beat the Bulldogs, then I probably might have had Geelong, Sydney, Melbourne from there. But with Melbourne's 2 losses in their last 3 games and the draw, I could not keep Melbourne in the top 5 just because their form has really, really dipped. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really kind of my explanation is Brisbane won their last game. Won their last game. They've won 3 out of 5. Yes, they had those 2 losses in a row. But if you look at it, a draw and a loss is almost the same equivalent of 2 losses for the Melbourne Demons.
Mm-hmm. And like usual, I really think like this fifth spot, what we've seen through most of the rounds is that trying to determine it, a lot of it's kind of splitting hairs. And so I did end up going with Melbourne. And it's just because they were 5. I don't think the Lions have done enough to maybe jump them. I mean, it's right there. Honestly, it could be 5A and 5B. I ultimately pulled the trigger and went with the Demons just because I ultimately like. So I mean, I'll say it again. Kind of my logic is when I have like a bit of an impasse and I see almost like a tie between a couple teams, I just go with neutral playing field. Who do I have the most confidence in to win that game against each other right now? And it's the Melbourne Demons, but I mean the Demons have another shaky game next round, whether it be shaky win or a loss or a draw, and the Brisbane Lions have another good game. Then yes, I'm gonna easily be able to put them ahead of them. But I mean they're neck and neck right now. I'm still a little bit I'm cautiously optimistic about this Lions team without Hipwood. They didn't look great in the 2 games after losing him, and they get the 1 win now. And so I think it's a huge game to see. Maybe they could get back-to-back wins without him, That's going to improve a lot to me. But, oh boy, it's really coming down to it. It's really coming down to it, and that's safe to say, right?
Oh, it's gonna be an incredible last 4 rounds. I'm super excited. I'm crossing my fingers COVID doesn't mess with it too much, but thankfully it looks like we might be able to at least get the regular season, and we just gotta hope that nothing changes. Thankfully, I think South Australia is coming out of lockdown. I think Melbourne is super close of coming out of lockdown themselves. So if we can get back to the point where at least four of the states that could play footy are all open, at least, I think that should bode very, very well for the finals. But I know that increased discussion now is that the potential that if the MCG cannot have at least 50,000, which right now is not anywhere close, Perth and Adelaide are both now up potentially to host another out of Victoria grand final. Well, really, again, there's plenty of time.
This grand final?
We'll have to see. There's still, from what I hear from some newsmates, is that if the AFL wants to start making plans for the grand final, they need to make a decision within the next couple of weeks. So we could find out if potentially the grand final is outside of Victoria again this season.
Obviously, I would prefer if it does take place in the MCG. Purely, I mean, it's historic, it's tradition, and I am a sucker for tradition. Even though it might seem like I was going out of it when I suggested the possibility of overtime a handful of weeks ago. It might sound like that broke tradition there, but I love it ultimately. Like, I'm a huge baseball fan over here, and obviously it's a game that's soaked in tradition, and good old, don't mean to get on the baseball tangent, but Rob Manfred's been trying to ruin it recently. But of course, that's a story for a different show. But if the second choice, the second option is Optus, that's not a bad venue to have that at. That's really not a bad backup plan.
And I think the other thing too is that they're really looking at is crowd size. Plain and simply, the AFL's got to, if the AFL wants to make any money out of the grand final, they need as bigger crowds they can possibly get. And right now, the MCG, you're not getting 50,000 anytime soon. No. Not at least in the next 2 weeks, unless they can make sure that they keep any COVID cases down to the point where they have 0 COVID cases for at least 2 weeks in a row. And I agree. If you cannot get at least 60,000 in the MCG, Perth is a really good option because you're going to get 60,000 in there. No matter if a Western Australian team is there or not, you're going to get 60,000 there. I can guarantee it almost. Yeah. So I know Victorians don't want to lose this game, but I don't want a grand final in front of an empty MCG. I want fans. I'm sorry. I want fans. And if that means the game has to be in Perth because you're going to get 60,000, I think many Australians and many Victorians should be amenable to the possibility that if you can't get 60,000, do it in Perth where you can get a full house.
Exactly. But that's going to lead us to our round 20 tipping here. Let's cap this episode off with some predictions, and this is a bit of an interesting one here. Obviously, there's a handful of games that might be able to surprise some people and could go either way, and who knows, maybe some kind of upsets in terms of tipping here. But let's start things off. It's going to be St. Kilda and Carlton, and I mean, St. Kilda, their skid, it came to an end, but they played a really solid game, and Carlton, obviously not looking great after North Melbourne. I like St. Kilda in this one in Marvel. It could be a little bit closer. It could be a 2, maybe 3 goal game. But ultimately, I think the Saints revitalize their finals hopes in this one.
Rowan Marshall is back, and when Rowan Marshall and Paddy Ryder play, the Saints usually win. I'm going to go with the Saints in here. I think Carlton is a train speeding off to an empty cliff, and unfortunately, I think they're going to take Coach Teague with them in that. Unfortunately, they are. I really wish this grand old club was not having the issues that they have, but right now they are an out of control train headed for a very high cliff, and unfortunately the fall may be ugly. So I am going to tip the Saints on this one.
Mm-hmm. And the next game is the biggest spread in terms of betting odds. We have the Western Bulldogs coming in at $1.08, and the Adelaide Crows coming in at a scorching $8. Oh, so if you want to tip underdogs, this is one hell of a game to spend some money on. Although I think there might be a better option than this one. But yeah, I'm taking the doggies at Mars almost every day. I think there's a chance where, with Taylor Walker back, you never know how many points this LA team could put up. The Western Bulldogs did give up a hefty margin to a D's team that isn't known for offense. So it could actually end up coming between maybe a couple goals. I like the doggies still, but don't be too surprised if the Crows are actually able to push this team a little bit.
I'm gonna pick the doggies in this one, especially considering I think this game with this game still being in Victoria. I have a hard time. This Crows team is just they are struggling right now. They're not playing really good footy. I think the doggies are playing really really well. I'm very fascinated to see how does Josh Shackey keep his spot, and does he continue to play back now that Alex Keith will be out for several weeks. I think the doggies win. I think the doggies will play really, really well in this one, so I'm really excited. I'm just hoping the Crows can keep it close.
Yeah, I have a little bit of confidence that they might be able to just pull that one off. But honestly, maybe if I want to give you a sneak preview of my underdog tips of the round that I put out typically every Wednesday or Thursday, just depending on maybe when games are. This is going to be one of them. We have going up to Tassie. We have the North Melbourne Roos taking on the Geelong Cats, and kind of going to what I was saying about the Cats earlier in this show, how they've been winning games, and they've been winning games by decent margins, but they haven't looked fantastic. And although that's hardly a knock on them, calling the team not fantastic isn't really discrediting them too much. But even how North has been playing, they have the ability to catch some teams off guard. So if you're going to bet a tip on underdog, I love this one. I'm going to go with the Cats still, but you got to keep an eye out on this game.
This is the proverbial trap game for me. This is the one where does Geelong overlook the high-powered Geelong? Does Geelong overlook a progressing, improving North Melbourne team? Do they walk in with everybody saying, "Hey, you're going to win this game. You should really win this game"? Does it bounce back? Does it really really hit them in the face in this one? I think the Cats should win this one, but keep an eye out. North Melbourne has just been so pesky. This is an older Geelong team. You never know how it's going to go. They're still without Jeremy Cameron. I think Gary Rowan is back, so I think it should be a Cats win. But North Melbourne's so pesky. I'm gonna want to keep an eye on this one.
Mm-hmm. And we're definitely one of the more interesting games of the round. And this is a must watch game right here. The next one is going to be the Gold Coast Suns at a venue to be determined somewhere in Victoria, taking on the Melbourne Demons. And this is one where we've seen a bit of a surprise Suns team recently, so I really think that they could push this Demons team maybe to their limits, almost what North Melbourne could do to the Geelong Cats. Ultimately, I am going to roll with Melbourne, but it's going to be a close affair.
It's the same basically. You can retrack and rewind what I just said when it comes to North Melbourne v Geelong. This is a potential trap game. Gold Coast is playing better. The D's potentially could be on the road. They have not completely ruled out Metricon Stadium potentially, but it's all the traveling between Queensland and Victoria and cases and everything like that. So there's still a ton up in the air. The D's should win this one, but the Suns are just going. I think they are going to give some headaches to this D's team, but I think D's win it. But this could potentially be very, very close.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, I'm excited about those two games. One that I might be a little bit less excited about, but nonetheless interested, of course, is the Collingwood Magpies and the West Coast Eagles. And going off of recent form in the last couple rounds, you got to pick the Eagles in this one. Although it does depend on what Eagles team you get. If you get the one we've seen recently, they should be able to win this game handily. If you get one of the ones where it's like the one that showed up against Sydney or North Melbourne. Maybe a Josh Kennedy-less team. You're going to have some issues. I will tip the Eagles in this one, though.
I'm gonna tip the Eagle. I'm gonna tip the Eagles in this one, but this is the game that always seems to get me. West Coast on the road at the G,
Right?
against a potential team that can give them headaches. Grundy and Nick Natanui is always an incredible ruck battle. I always look forward to when these two face each other. These two bulls of the ruck ring are absolutely outstanding to watch. This will be what midfield benefits from the winning of the ruck battles. If Nick Nat starts to get up on Grundy because of his size and athleticism, I think the West Coast Eagles should win this one. But man, this is 3 games in a row where I'm sitting here going, man, this is ripe for an upset.
Mm-hmm. And one where it might be right for an upset as well, man. What kind of Don's team we get. If they can go out there to the Gab and maybe punch the Swans in the mouth from the start and hold on after said punching of the mouth, yeah, they could take this game. But given, the returning players, as you mentioned, for Sydney, and how well they've been looking, between Isaac Haney, between Tom Papley, between Buddy Franklin, and the hosts of other guys that have been producing a great volume, this should be a game where Sydney solidifies their spot in the finals and keeps that hope alive for a top 4 spot. And Essendon might be hoping on some losses this round to keep them in the hunt.
Well, this one's going to be a fun one because this is a rematch of round 4 where Sydney only won by 3. This is a really keep your eye out one for it. But here's a couple of caveats. Buddy was not playing at the time, so Buddy was not there. So this is going to be a little bit different. There've been a few lineup changes. I think I've said it before earlier in the episode. It is never easy to beat a team a second time. I'm going to tip Sydney, but Essendon, just there's something about them this season. I just don't want to give up on them. I think they are going to give Sydney headaches because of some of the height and athleticism that they have on this team. I don't think with Jones being out, I think that kind of uncomplicates Sydney's issues in the back line, but we'll definitely have to see how does Mills and Cunningham come back. Are they full strength? Are they full fitness because of the fact that they've had to isolate? Yes, they've been given treadmills and they've been given running, but they've had to do it in their own hotel room. So we'll have to see how is their fitness. How does Mills and Cunningham, if they do come back in straight away, how do they assimilate back into the team? And will we see any fatigue issues with these two players if they do come back?
Obviously, something to keep an eye out for. Great point there. We'll see how it affects them. And then up in Tasmania, we got the Hawthorne Hawks and the Brisbane Lions. And, this is another game. I'm just going to say again, another game where Hawthorne might play the Brisbane Lions competitively. I do ultimately like the Lions, and for the Hawks, this is another game where they get really... There's potential where North Melbourne is able to jump the Hawks in this one. And the Hawks might be the bottom team at the end of the round. It could be close. Probably won't happen, but there's a decent chance.
Trap game number 4. Because again, I a lower base team that's playing okay footy against an upper team that I think a lot of people are going to sit there, pat them on the back and go, well, you should win this round. Shouldn't be much of a problem. And these are the games that usually bite you. It is at University of Tasmania Stadium, which the Hawks play really, really well. But I'm not liking the vibe on this club right now, especially since the whole Clarkson Mitchell transition, whatever it's supposed to be. I'm still kind of confused on that myself. I'm going to tip the Lions on this one, but this is another one I will be keeping my eye on because the potential for an upset is ripe on this one.
And then the next game also has a little bit of potential. The last 2 games have potential for upsets here. This whole round has potential for upsets. There's no lock game, so this is... I don't really bet on most sports, and would never be able to bring myself to bet on the AFL. Just almost guaranteed to lose money. At best, you might wash. But we got the GWS Giants taking on Port Adelaide in a pretty big matchup for either team. Port Adelaide, with the chance that they lose this one, they might lose out of the top 4. The Giants need to win this one, likely if they want to stay in the top 8, or they have a bunch of other teams lose. But honestly, the Giants are going to fall out of the top 8 if they lose this game, actually, because if you take a look, Fremantle and Richmond, more than likely one of those teams is going to win that game. Obviously, got thrown the potential for a draw. But more than likely, GWS loses, they drop out. So this is a big one for them. They are going to be, I guess, the home team right now. It's still in a to-be-confirmed venue in Victoria. So obviously, things are going to change as closer we get to the game. But ultimately, I'll take Port Adelaide in this one. But returning Toby Green could really spark this Giants team, and maybe they get their rear ends on check and they kind of feel the heat from the hot seat and maybe get onto a pace to sprint to these finals in the last 4 games.
I agree with you. The return of Toby Green, but it's kind of like what I said with Mills and Cunningham. What Toby Green are you getting? Are you getting a Toby Green that's underdone a little bit? We'll have to see. But the thing I look at it is, I agree with you. I'm going to go with Port because Port is getting healthy. Rosie's back. Butters is back. Dersma's back. And it sounds like there's a possibility Fantasia could be back quite soon. And Robbie Gray is probably due here about a round before the finals. Port Adelaide's getting their young stars and their skill back. I think that is going to get them over the line in this one. So I'm going to tip Port. But this, for me, is game of the round. If GWS plays the game that they can, this is going to be an almighty cracking game of footy. I cannot wait to watch this game this weekend.
And then the last game of the round, we can head on over to Optus. Possible location for the grand final this year. And it's certainly going to be a super interesting matchup in terms of finals implications for the Fremantle Dockers and the Richmond Tigers. And even with the injuries, obviously either side has taken a handful of injuries that have been just kind of devastating to either team. But I'm going to take the underdog in the Fremantle Dockers in this one. I think they might be able to pull it together enough, and a little bit of that Optus magic might lead them to win in a potential spot in the top 8 at the end of the round.
Now, I'm gonna go with Richmond in this one, and there's 2 massive reasons why. And unfortunately, I did discuss them during no Nat Fife, season done with a shoulder injury, and no Michael Walters. 2 of your best players on the Freo Dockers that were healthy, both out for this game. Yes, Richmond doesn't have Dusty. Yes, Richmond is very, very injured in the back, but they've been picking some youngsters and have been playing better footy. I think that the voodoo of Optus Stadium is not as strong this round because you're playing a Freo team that is injured. They're still fighting injuries. And if Darcy is not fully healthy, I think Nankervis has a big game in this one. I think Richmond just has a little too much. I'm sorry, Knockers fans who know me very well. I really want to tip them, but losing Fife and Walters in that game against Sydney, I think might be a death blow, unfortunately, to Freo's final chances, because I think those 2 losses are absolutely gigantic.
Obviously, no, Nat Fife is going to play a huge role, but it might not be as big of a loss as some people might think, at least when it comes to the scoreboard, because Nat Fife, at best, has been fairly iffy this year when it comes to goal kicking in accuracy. So, goal-wise, he might not hurt this team too much. But obviously, there is going to be a hole that's going to be hard to fill. It's always hard to fill a role of a player like Nat Fife, though. So. That's always fair to say. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for our tipping and our round 19 coverage. Thank you so much for sticking with us all the way to the end, and we really do appreciate all of your support. So this is another round where it's going to be crazy, and also just got to wish Donnie and his team, the Des Moines Roosters, good luck in their games this weekend. Of course, going to be a fun set of them. Hopefully, you guys are going to be rocking those just super nice. I mean, honestly, better than some AFL teams who were those red Guernseys that you guys got there. So, man, I love that. Best of luck to you this round. But if you could, your thoughts in one word or phrase about round 20, what is it?
Oh, we said it so many times. We said it 4 times. I think the word of the round could be trap.
Yep.
Because you've got 4 potential massive trap games for teams that are in the finals right now, facing lower bottom 4 teams that they're in, as some would say, and for the college basketball fans over here for us in the US, they are in the upset alert. That I know that there's that possibility. We just don't know. And thank you for the good luck for the Roosters. We only have one game this weekend. Kansas City is coming up here. We'll probably play a full game. So keep an eye on my social medias at Coach Hess 40, both on Twitter and
Instagram. Hell
and
yeah.
Instagram.
Fresh to the platform.
I know, it's just really, really, really awesome. In fact, I know if you looked at it, I actually got a like from the official Sharon Instagram when I put out
Look at you.
my yellow Sharon. So I thought that was really, really cool.
Oh yeah.
For that. So it'll be a fun weekend. Watching the footy and playing the footy is always great. So
It's going to be a great time. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, thank you so much for joining on to the end. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see all of you after a huge round 20 of the AFL season.